Hmm? Oh, all right.
Mine says 20.
Hello, everybody. To those we haven't seen in a while, welcome back. To the new ones starting out, you're doing good. To the ones who are a little more senior, holding a bigger role, you're doing awesome. What I intended to talk about tonight is the new energies, because so much is changing. We have been working for more lifetimes than most of you can easily imagine, slowly preparing this world and weaving pieces back together so that it could be what it is now. And in the past 6 months, starting right before Christmas, there's been an incredible amount of work on my part and a few others to tune some things, to wake some things up, to open some things in this world. And in the last month, a lot of that has finally begun to bear fruits. It's as if for a very, very long time we've been clearing trees and tilling the soil. As of Christmas, we saw the first sprouts of things beginning to grow. And now we're seeing the first strawberries, the first small fruits. And what we're going to see over the next 100 years, what we're likely to see, is more and more and more fruits. More and more amazing things happening. As this garden grows, however, it's going to need more people working in it. So what I had intended to talk about was these things, these new energies. And I will, because so much has happened in the last 2 weeks. I'll start by talking a little bit about this. Gimli, ground. For those of you who are moderately sensitive, you've probably felt some things the last 2 or 3 weeks. Nervous, anxious, a lot of kid stuff coming up again, sometimes actually physically shaking or vibrating. This is okay. This is happening because there's a lot more healthy energy moving than there ever is before. And it's not just the energy in the world. There's actually a process working with the energy of the earth, which is growing up into people, to animals, to trees and plants, and reconnecting them where they've been disconnected. So a lot of people have been disconnected from the fundamental energies of life, probably for their whole life. And those are reconnecting, whether they know it or not, even if they're not walking a path. The earth itself is reaching up and reconnecting them. And this is why you're feeling so much more. For those of you who haven't noticed this, it's okay. At this point, a lot of the energies are still subtle. For the very sensitive, it may seem a lot, but for those of you who aren't as sensitive, you may not really be noticing. What you can do, and you can talk with Roja or anybody above Greenbelt about this, you can go stand outside, someplace where you can maybe feel some sunshine, breathe the air, see some green, and you can tune to, you can open up to the new energies. And if you can manage this, you'll feel some really wonderful things, some amazing things. Someone this past week tuned into it and he said, it's so astounding. It's like they're singing to me. It's like the whole world is singing. And it is. The fundamental tune, the fundamental pattern in this world has been chaotic for a long time, every piece just firing on its own. And it's finally, as of what happened in Christmas, begun to work together. And as of this past 2 weeks, begun to really sound like a single group, singing a single beautiful song. You can tune into that. You can be aware of it. Now, this is not 6 months worth of work. This is not something any one white belt managed. This is something that a whole group of us have been working on for many thousands of years, tuning and shaping this. And it just happens to be coming to fruition now, making this a really wonderful time to be alive and to play. And I had intended to give you some exercises and talk about playing with it and so on, but there is something that I feel is more fundamental. For those of you who are not black belt sensors, you're going to have to take my word on this, because you simply don't have the senses to tell. There has been a war going on between the male and female energies in this world for potentially 300,000 years. And it's not easy to see. You look and see men and women dating and people getting married and having kids, and you say, oh, everything's fine. But for those of you who are more sensitive, you'll be able to tell what I'm talking about. The male and female energies have been at war. They have fought. And this war has continued generation after generation. Maybe the first was some sort of crime or violence. And somewhere a woman began to hate all men, or a man began to hate all women. And at some point that person had children. And a woman, no matter how much she loves her son, at some level is going to look at him and say, yes, you're a man. And if she has that anger, she's going to point that anger at the child. Not consciously, not with her heart. It's something very deep inside. And that child, that little boy, is going to grow up feeling that women are angry, that they hate him. And a father who has this is going to look at his little girl and say, oh, you're going to grow up to be a woman and be, mean and manipulative and cruel like all the rest. And so he's going to point this at the little girl, and she's going to pick it up. And it becomes much more obvious around puberty, when little boys start to act like men and little girls start to act more like women. And your parents withdraw a bit. Most of you, when you were 5 years old, little girls say, you could sit on Dad's lap and feel very comfortable, and Dad was this big safe guy. But somewhere around puberty, Dad started keeping you at a distance. Just about everyone has this experience, those who had a dad to work with, that somewhere around the time that you hit puberty, Dad started pushing you away a little bit. You weren't sitting on his lap, you weren't playing, you weren't wrestling like you used to do. And it's the same with boys. A little boy who's hugged by mom and reassured when he's 3. When he hits puberty, when he starts growing a little hair on his face and starts showing some of the more male characteristics, that mom just starts keeping a little distance. She still loves him, of course, she's mom. But she's a little bit scared too, because something inside her says, oh, this one's going to become a man, and all men are evil. All men are pigs, all men are dogs. And I want you, for now, to just accept this. Because something in each of you will be saying, well, this didn't happen to me, or I wouldn't do that to my kids. But this is something that's happening at an energetic level, below what we're consciously aware of, even below what we're emotionally aware of. This is something happening at a more fundamental level. And so it is happening. And mom passed it on to her sons, and dad passed it on to his daughter. And after 100,000, 300,000 years, however long it's been, generation after generation, it's been passed on. And there are places in human history where we see it acted out more actively. There are places in the world where there are organized rape camps in the world today, that little girls can be taken from their family and tossed into one of these camps and then repeatedly raped until they die. And then they just grab another little girl and toss her in there. This is going on today, places all over the world. We see it very obviously in the Roman Catholic Inquisition, where over 300 years, more than 1 million women were systematically tortured and killed by a male patriarchal church. Just all this male anger at the female. And we see it in women. You can watch any television show and see women say, oh, men are pigs, they're all animals, oh, I hate them all, why do we put up with them? And you can hear women, you can sit and talk to other women, and you can hear them say things, oh, just manipulate him, just, make him do what you want, he's just a man. Just withhold sex for a while, he'll do anything you want. Wrap him around your finger, he deserves to be controlled, he's a man. You see, because this world's been mostly patriarchal, less obvious examples of female-dominated cultures eliminating the men. You simply don't see them as often. They exist in stories, in mythologies, cultures that are female-run, where the men are either killed as children or kept as slaves. But you don't see as many in the human history. And see, this idea, this fundamental conflict, this war, this deep-seated rage that exists between men and women, it affects everything we do. Now, most of you won't know what I'm talking about. Those of you who know history can look back at history and get a sense of it. Those of you who are very sensitive can look inside and get a sense of it. We've got a couple of the higher level belts this past 2 weeks. I've been trying to help them be aware of this. That these are people who have been doing this process for 2 years or more, who are very mature, very stable, very good at what they do. And yet, when this piece comes up, they find themselves lashing out at someone because they're a different gender, or running in fear from someone because they're a different gender. Most of the time when I talk to you, I tell you not to believe me. I don't want you to believe, I want you to go out and explore. What I'm talking about now is something that's way beyond what most of you will sense before your black belts. So for now, I'm going to just ask you to trust me, because this is so important. The reason the divorce rate is so high, well, one of the reasons, is because of this fundamental antipathy, anger, aggression, deep-seated rage between males and females. Have any of you heard of the term hallway sex? I know you have. Years ago, I don't remember where I was in a group of men, perhaps with the fire department, perhaps earlier. And someone said, oh, the only sex I have now with my wife is hallway sex. And I said, what's that? He said, that's when you both pass each other in the hallway at night and you both say, fuck you. And this wasn't a 1 in 1,000 families this is true. This is apparently true in the majority of couples, that after enough years married, they build this aggression, this antipathy between them, and they think, we're doing something wrong. Why don't I get along with my husband? Why don't I get along with my wife? I'm screwing up. But the truth is, the vast majority of relationships have been together more than about 5 years, more than 10 years. They are suffering. Parts of each of them is dying, casualties of this war. And it affects all of us. It affects us when we're children and we don't get what we need from our parents. It's the reason that the vast majority of females in this world, and those with a lot of female energy, are looking for approval. The reason there is so much anorexia and bulimia, the reason so much is spent on liposuction or breast enhancement, why so much is spent on makeup or clothes, is because most women don't like who they are. There's a desperate need for approval. And the reason they don't have that is because that comes from dad. That comes from the dad energies. And early on, dad started pushing them away, and they learned that somehow they couldn't be approved of. And the vast majority of men don't feel loved. The reason we have so much crime, violence, the reason we have wars in this world, the reason we have rape and abuse and ugly, cruel governments running so many things, the reason we have all this is because your average male doesn't feel loved. You could take the most aggressive dictator in the world and put him with someone who had their heart online, someone who every day, several times a day, could say, I love you from here, and mean it so that they felt it, and that person would change. It doesn't matter if it's Stalin, who killed an insane number of people. It doesn't matter if it's Adolf Hitler. Someone who's in the out-of-control violence simply doesn't know that they're loved, and the right person who could make them feel that would change everything. That peace would just melt. Not overnight, but they'd feel less and less driven to the rage and the violence, because those come from fear. And fear can't happen when you're deeply loved, when you know you're loved. When you're truly loved, you feel safe and fear doesn't come up. Without fear, there can't be the anxiety. Without the anxiety, there can't be the anger. Without the anger, there can't be the rage. Without the rage, there can't be the violence. Without the violence, there can't be the systematic, institutionalized violence that we have seen in so many places around this world. So much of the ugliness, the confusion, the pain in this world has come from this fundamental disconnect between the male and female energies, most of the time between men and women. And it's been going on for more lifetimes than any of you can easily imagine. And it affects every single one of you. I don't care who you are. If you could drill down deep enough, anybody who works primarily with the female energy, that's most women, can drill down deep enough, they're going to find something inside that says, I hate all men, they're all assholes, you can't trust any of them, they're all blah blah blah, whatever the latest complaint is. And any man or any woman who works with the male energy enough, who can drill down deep enough, will find this. Oh, all women are lying, cheating, horrible, evil, manipulative. It's going to come up in everybody. This thing is woven into every single one of you. I don't care who you are. You spend 20, 30, 40 years on a spiritual path. You get aware enough to find this thing, you can clear it. But the vast majority of humanity never has. This affects all of us. And it causes us to be unkind in our relationships. It causes us to not be understanding, to be abusive to others, or to be abusive to ourselves, to blame ourselves for not being good enough. It causes us, when we're in a relationship, to try to manipulate and control and abuse. Right? I've got to keep you under my thumb or you'll hurt me. It causes us in a relationship to lock up and be afraid to share who we really are. You know, if they know who I really am, they can control me because they'll know all my secrets. So we hide and we deceive, and then we wonder why our partner doesn't know us. And then we get more frustrated and angry with them because they're not giving us what we need, but they don't know who we are. And they're doing the same. This kind of relationship can only grow from the initial falling in love and the amazing feeling to apathy and then to antipathy. As more and more you're hiding who you are, they're trying to please someone that you aren't. They don't understand who you are. They're scared and angry and lashing out. They're hiding who they are. You're scared and angry and lashing out. It can only get worse. In some couples, this is an active war. Many of us have memories of parents or have seen others shouting at each other, maybe throwing things around the house. Sometimes it's an active war. With many, it becomes... How many people have heard of the DMZ? Not the computer term. In Korea. Now, the U.S. has been a major source of violence and division in the world for a long time. And the U.S. spent a lot of time invading and destroying Korea and Vietnam and all kinds of places before they finally got booted out. And whether they were right or wrong isn't relevant. What's relevant is that the southern half of Korea got aligned with one political side, and the northern half of Korea got aligned with another political side. And so unless they wanted to have all-out war, North fighting the South every day, they had to come up with a solution. And so they came up with a solution. They took across the entire country a strip of land that's 3 to 5 kilometers wide. I don't know exactly. The entire width of a nation. They've got this long alley. And they filled it with mines and bombs and traps and barbed wire and razor wire. And they stacked up machine guns and lasers and deadly weapons and monitoring cameras and built walls all around it. The idea being that anybody who steps into that DMZ, both sides get to kill. And it works, more or less. Because neither side sneaks in and messes with the other side. The country has not been actively at war for the last 50 years or whatever it's been. The DMZ, the demilitarized zone, the place where no military is allowed to go, has kept a kind of peace. But it's not peace. The people of North Korea fear and hate the South Koreans. The people of South Korea fear and hate the North Koreans. A country which should be, at this point, prosperous and successful. It spends a vast amount of its money, its energy, its time maintaining this rip right across the middle of the country. So much energy, so much fear, so much anger, so much death and violence, so much sneaking and spying and deception happens because of this DMZ. And see, the majority of the time, if a husband hits a wife or a wife hits a husband, somebody calls the police and maybe one of them goes to jail. Really physically violent relationships are not that common anymore. The majority of relationships build this DMZ. They build this huge zone across the middle of their relationship where they each aren't allowed to go and they each just stay on the opposite side, maybe kind of wave or talk across it. The majority of relationships after 10 years have a built-in DMZ. And there is mistrust, there's fear, there's anger, there's violence. There can be spying on one another, talking bad about one another, being terribly afraid of one another, doing intentionally cruel or manipulative things. And I'm not talking strange families. Even the best of families eventually tend to develop this. In the best of cases, it's kind of a polite thing. It's not so heavily armed. Oh, I know that when my husband's in a bad mood, he goes out to the garage or the basement, and I just don't talk to him for 4 or 5 hours. Right? He needs his space. Right? Oh, I know when my wife's in a mood, I just give her the credit card and let her go shopping, and I don't ask. And they just kind of keep this distance. I don't look, I don't ask, I don't tell. This is the best of relationships. The majority have a much more active, aggressive, self-destructive and other destructive DMZ running through the middle of them. And it's true of everybody. I don't care who you are. If you've been in a relationship more than a few years, you've begun to sense it. Normally, cartoons, little, square with words and a picture, normally they're funny. They often are true. They point out something that makes us laugh. I saw a cartoon this past week with 2 panels, right, slashed at the middle and 2 panels. On the top one, it says, "Me and my girlfriend when we first met." And it shows this couple lying in bed, and he's wrapped around you saying, "I love you and I'll always protect you no matter what happens, you're the most important thing in my world." And the other side said, "Me and my girlfriend after 2 years." And he was on one side of the bed and she was on the other. And she was saying something like, "I have a headache," or I need something. He said, "Fuck you, give me the blankets and go away." And this isn't funny. I mean, there's no humor here. But obviously, it touches something that a lot of people feel, or it wouldn't have been made into a comic that is put out there for people to enjoy. That at the start, there can be something wonderful and amazing, But in a very short time, relationships drift into fear and aggression and violence and insecurity. Now I understand that a lot of you have avoided relationships your whole life, right? Maybe had one relationship, maybe none, just because you sense at some level how bad it is, how difficult it's going to be, how much trouble it's going to cause, and just, I want to go there because, relationships might be cool, but I'm not going to do it. And so many of you are still at 25, at 30, avoiding your first relationship. You too are victims of this war between the genders. I want you to understand, because this is affecting all of us. When we lash out at one another, when we're cruel or unkind to someone, when we're even just a little judgmental, oh, it's a guy, what do they understand about emotions? Oh, it's a girl, of course she's lying, her lips are moving. These, seemingly off-the-cuff remarks that probably all of you have heard. Probably everyone. Jokes, humor, that make fun of women, that make fun of men. All of you have heard them. I don't believe any of you who could have lived a lifetime without seeing this again and again. This isn't something out there that's affecting you. It's something woven deep inside you. It's causing the largest wars and struggles in this world. It's causing the vast budgets being spent on spies and black ops and deception and violence and horror. It's causing individual families to fall apart. It's causing every single child to be hurt. Because they're feeling this war between their parents, and because they're feeling parts of it pointed at them. Now, you might say, so what? I mean, if it's going on, what can we do? Clearly this is bigger than you or me. Well, it's bigger than you. You might say, what can we do about it? And I tell you that from the top down, from the high level, we have been working on it. We have been re-engineering these things at very deep levels, reaching into the core of this conflict and making it right, so that at the deepest levels this war between the genders is beginning to fall apart. And we will keep working to fix these things at a deep level. But see, it's too late for all of you, because you have all been born and grown up in a world where this is part of your life, which means just fixing the underlying problem isn't enough. You're all going to have to become aware enough to fix yourselves. And I want you to understand that this is a really big deal. This is not elf path. This is not specific to those on a spiritual path. This is something that affects every being in this world. And so this is something where every being in this world needs to become aware, needs to start looking. If someone makes a joke about, oh, all women or all men or hallway sex or relationships, and something in you laughs, I mean, something in you is uncomfortable, something in you is still being affected, you need to start looking for that and removing it. If you find yourself being dismissive or unkind or cruel or manipulative, look and see why. Imagine doing that to a man, and then imagine doing it to a woman and see if your response is different. This is, in essence, what I'm telling you is a bit like, say, in South Africa after apartheid was officially ended, or in the south of the US after slavery was officially abolished. What I'm telling you is you need to go inside and start being aware of all of your prejudices. You've got to look and say, all right, if I were offering this job to a white man, here's how I'd respond. If offering it to a black man, here's how I'd respond. And you can imagine how in 1800 that would have been very, very difficult in the south of the US, or in 1900 in South Africa, to look at a black person and a white person the same. Now most of us do it and don't think too much of it. Most of us have gotten past the intense racism of the last few centuries. But see, not that long, 50 or 100 years ago, this would have been almost inconceivable. The process I am directing all of you toward right now, moving forward, is in essence the same process that those who have been very racist have had to go through. You're going to have to start teaching your children that there has been racism. Right? You're going to have to start teaching your children that there has been anger between men and women, and helping them to notice these things. Say, oh, hey, I recognize that. That's that anger you talked about. You're going to have to start giving them better ways to handle it. You're going to have to start looking in yourself and saying, do I have this peace? You're going to have to start poking it on purpose. A sort of inner equal opportunity, where places that have used equal opportunity laws have said, all right, you have to hire a certain percentage of people of this race, whether you like them or not. It forced you to deal with people of minority races and gave them opportunities, and in time built up a greater equality. You're going to need to do a sort of intentional inner equal opportunity. If you find yourself comfortable talking to a man, but, a little scared or intimidated or dismissive when talking to a woman, it's time to start forcing yourself to go and sit down and talk to women. And not as someone to manipulate or someone to sleep with or someone to take advantage of, but the same way you would look at a man. And if you find it easier to work with women or to trust women or to talk to women, you're going to need to do the same thing. You're going to have to intentionally force yourself to sit down and talk to men, to work with men, to trust men. And again, not as someone to manipulate, to deceive. No comments like, oh, all men are this or all women are that. That's this kind of racism that we are just beginning to try to be aware of. This kind of racism isn't healthy or helpful. This horrible violence, this hatred, it can only begin to stop with awareness on the part of every single one of you. You have to be able to look inside and say, yeah, I feel really comfortable talking to that guy, but I don't want to sit with her. And you need to look and see if it's gender. And then force yourself to go and talk to her, or vice versa. And you need to start calling other people on it. You hear some man make a joke about women, you say, hey, that's out of line. You can't judge half the population of the world based on a prejudice. You need to stop it. Just as you might call someone for being racist or wearing HH tattoo or the swastika, for instance. You would want to call them on it. You want to say, hey, I'm aware of what you're doing and it's not okay. We want to start watching for this in ourselves. We want to start watching for it in others. We want to start communicating it. And we want to start working around it. Now, for those of you in relationships, most of you cannot sense what I'm talking about directly. Perhaps you can see some of the results of it, or you can see it in your parents or your friends. So, what I want you to do, those of you in relationships, is to start thinking, maybe he's right. He's a very good sensitive. He's been doing this for a long time. Maybe he's right. Let me look and see if I'm carrying any of those energies. And if you are, the only way you're going to be able to repair it is if both you and your spouse want to. And you start working actively towards doing it. Hey, I've got this anger towards men, and I'm directing it at you. I've got this anger or fear towards women, and I'm directing it at you. It's something that is going to take ultimately several generations. It's not going to be fixed in this lifetime. Bad news for those of you in relationships now. It's not going to be fixed completely. The good news is you can make it a lot better as you begin to realize how much fear there is between the males and females of this world. As you begin to sense it and see how much anger and how much aggression and how much lashing out and how much cruelty, you can begin to change it. And as you begin to change it in yourselves, You can begin to salvage your relationship. You can begin to train your children if you have them. You can begin to train yourself. And see, those of you who aren't in relationships, you're actually at a disadvantage. You might say, well, I don't have that. Those of you who are in a relationship, wait till the next time he leaves his socks a certain place, or says a certain something, or doesn't do, or lies. Wait till she, says this, manipulates, deceives. Wait until one of these little things pops up. And watch yourself go, roar! You go from 0 to roar in just seconds. Oh, you said you would. And it can be incredibly intense. Many of you in relationships have experienced this. That you can go from calm to just incredibly angry in a short time over simple things. And see, you've got an advantage here. If you find yourself angry or frustrated with what your partner's doing, you can use that to help find the peace inside that's scared. Because the angry, the frustrated always comes from fear. Those of you in relationships have an advantage. Those of you not in relationships, you're going to have to work it out with your friends, your co-workers, people on the streets. So, in order, the most important things here. Number one, this is fundamentally, critically, and importantly true. So until you can sense it, I ask you to just accept it. Number two, I ask you to start looking for evidence. Look for jokes, look for stuff in history, look for references in movies and television, look at relationships, at friends, at families, and see if you can sense this anger that exists between men and women, this cruelty, this fear, because it's there. Number three, once you've accepted that it seems to be true, and begun to look for evidence and find some evidence of it, start looking for it in yourself. Because you all have it. Places where you just don't trust. Imagine yourself doing something with a man and then with a woman and see how you respond differently. If you find yourself being short-tempered, unkind, judgmental, cruel, dismissive, pull yourself out of the situation for a moment and then imagine doing that with a person of the other gender. If you're doing it with a man, imagine doing it with a woman. And see if inside you respond the same. It may take you some time to begin to find, because this is a deeply, deeply buried piece. But it's an important one. I watched one of our kids in the last week or two at a coffee shop. And he wanted to talk to a man who was sitting at a table. So he walked over and sat down. And the man's sister was there with him. Right? And he looked at the man, talked, and was animated. And the woman said something. And he looked like this. And he went back and talked to the man. And she said something. I don't think he realized he was doing it. But he quite literally turned his head to the side and made this disgusted face while he talked to her. And he went back to being very happy while he talked to him. And to anybody who was watching, it was very easy to see. And I don't know that he realized it at the time. I pointed it out afterwards. And see, every one of you has pieces of this. And you may find that it only shows up with older men. Or it only shows up with, big, strong, hairy men. Or it only shows up with, red-headed women, or women who are very sexy, or very fat women. I don't know. You may find it shows up more with a certain subset, depending on your parents, depending on the good and bad experiences you've had. But this piece is here, and it's critical. So, that was 3. Begin to be aware of it in yourselves. 4. Begin to talk about it. Right? Maybe write about it in Facebook or your blog or whatever. If you see someone having trouble in their relationship, maybe talk with them a bit. Do there's kind of an inherent mistrust between men and women? Ever heard anybody say, oh, all men are pigs? Oh, all women lie, all women deceive. Have you ever heard anybody say these things? And begin to talk to them about it. Because as you look for the pieces in the world, as you look for the pieces in yourself, and as you begin to talk about them, you'll become more and more aware. And with awareness comes the ability to fix this thing. Without awareness, you say, oh, it's not there, and you ignore it. And it is there. It's there in every one of you. I can see it in every one of you. And it's there in this world. So, with those steps, we begin to build awareness. Now, as we do, we're going to come up, each of us, with techniques. Oh, you know, I find that when I imagine this, it helps. Right? I imagine that man dressed as a woman, or I imagine it actually is a woman. I just turn him into a woman in my head, or I turn her into a man, or I find that when I use this set of words versus that set of words, I find a good way to trigger this is to go talk to this person or to say this thing. You're going to find these techniques. What I'd like you to do whenever you find anything that helps you to be either more aware or to begin to resolve some of the inner fear, to share that with the others, with the rest of this group. Because in sharing, other people will try it and say, oh, that really did work, or, well, that didn't work for me, or if you do it this way, it's even better, and your process gets improved. So, those steps are the ones I would focus on for now. And I know that this sounds very dark and scary, and I really, given how amazing the changes in the world are right now, I was intending to talk about something much more upbeat. But I see this coming up in several vectors in my life lately, and so I feel this is an important time. And I want you to know that we are working at a deep level, which is going to cause it to get worse. In essence, I'm taking a plant with incredibly deep roots, and I'm pulling out all the roots. Which means all the stems and such are going to shake and vibrate and be messy for a while, because I'm pulling up the roots to it. So this is a time when you're likely to see more of it. More mistrust of men for women, and more anger of women at men. More manipulation, more cruelty. This is a good time to be studying and be aware. So yeah, what I'm saying sounds like, ooh, bad news, scary, terrible, why is he telling us this stuff? But what I'm telling you is actually good news. This has been going on for an incredibly long time. And more people than you can imagine have been hurt, tortured, abused, killed by this. And this is a time where it's being made right. This is a time where the energy is actually changing. Right? This is a time where we have a chance to fix this. You, every one of you, has a chance to have a healthy relationship now that you didn't 20 years ago, that you didn't 2 years ago. Every one of you can get along better with your children than you ever would have. This is a chance to begin to heal something that's been terribly wrong, terribly broken, terribly screwed up for a very long time. So rather than being scared by what I'm saying or bothered or think, ooh, this is awful, I want you to look at this as a time to celebrate. Because this deep, deep problem has been in our lives more generations than you can imagine. And now we can begin to fix it. For those of you who had trouble in your relationships, think of this as a time that finally you can begin to understand why you react like you do, why the fear, the anger comes up, why the mistrust, the manipulation come up, why the cruelty or the violence or the anxiety or the drama, why they come up. You can begin to understand this. And so this really is a time of healing. It's a time when the fundamental wound is being repaired, and that all of us can begin to heal it in ourselves. That's just that healing has to begin with awareness. We can't heal a thing that we don't know, because we can't even get to it. Right? Imagine trying to treat a sick bear, but the bear's in a cave half a kilometer away. How much good are you going to be? You got to find where he's hiding and bring him out of his cave and into the light and begin to work with him. So, if I have scared you folks, I apologize. It's not my intention. This is an incredibly scary topic, true, but it's been scary for a long time and it doesn't have to be anymore. What I want you to take away from this is every one of you who's had relationships that have failed, this is a big piece of that. Every one of you who are having trouble in your relationships now, this is a big piece of that. Every one of you who have been scared to or enter a relationship or intimidated and so haven't done it yet, this is a big piece of that. Now you folks, all of you will be able to do these things with greater peace, with greater integrity, with greater awareness. Because these fundamental energies are changing in very, very deep and impressive ways. And all you have to do, you don't have to worry about all the deep stuff or the messy stuff. All you have to do is start looking inside and finding inside any even little bit of this. Any part of you that says, oh, all men, all women. Anything at all. And just start communicating the steps I've given you, right? Find these things, understand them, communicate them. That's all. Basically what I'm saying is we're tearing down the Berlin Wall here, and all you guys have to do is keep from tripping on the bricks. So, incredibly big deal. And the more you can be aware that there are pieces inside you that are terrified of men and angry and want to lash out at men, or ones that are terrified of women and don't trust them, want to cower and hide or get physically violent and abuse. As long as you recognize it's there, and it's not your fault, any more than if your parents had been terribly racist and you find that you're a bit racist, you can start being aware of it. You can start looking at, I don't know, the data, the information. You can start interacting with people of whatever race you're afraid of. You can start repairing that in yourself. This is something that affects you, but it's something you can now finally begin to fix. So, big scary topic. Time for incredible celebration. The beginning of a huge change in the world. Going to be simplified a lot as more men start dating men and more women start dating women. That will help smooth over this transition immensely. For those of you who are married, well, you have to deal with this. Do any of you have any questions or any parts of this not clear?
I have a question.
Okay.
Will it be any easier on gay couples?
Will it make a difference on gay couples? The truth is that this isn't truly about men and women. This is about the male energies and the female energies. And since at least Freud and Jung, there has been this idea that there is an animus, a male component of the spirit in women, and an anima, a female component of the spirit in men. It's true, we've all got the yin and yang energies. If you're walking an A2F path, you have an A2M. If you're walking an A1M, you also have an A1F. We all have the male and the female inside, right? So this is really a conflict between the energies. If you have one partner in a gay relationship that is very, very macho, lots of male energy and no female, and one partner that's lots of female energy and very little male, they're going to run into the same thing as a traditional hetero couple. And contrawise, alternatively, in a male-female couple, where both of them have lots of male energy and very little female, they don't have so much of a problem with this. And there's a conflict between the energies, and so whatever are the strongest energies you express in your life. And if it's not obvious, it's also then a conflict within yourself. If you all have male and female energies, those of you who align with the male may simply not trust the more feminine energies in yourself. Those of you who align with the feminine may not trust the more masculine energies in yourself. That's okay. This is something that's just coded into you, and you can begin to change it. Now, I'm not going to debate whether this is real, because sensing it is beyond what most of you can sense. But other than that sort of debate, are there questions? Questions like, what can we do about it, or how can we, or what's a good method for, or process questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
If you, as a woman, tell like a group of men that they shouldn't talk negatively about women,
Okay.
will it not make it bigger?
All right. So imagine An attractive woman walks by a construction site and all the men start whistling and yelling. Right? If a woman responds to that, won't it make it worse? Imagine you work in a big office with lots of cubicles. All right? In the second cubicle in from the door, there's a big fat guy in there who wears the same clothes every day and sits over his desk like this and eats lots of Cheetos. Right? And he never takes a bath. So he smells really bad. Right? Imagine this. Many of you have had an experience like this, something like that at work. Right? But imagine this big fellow. We'll call him the gopher. Right? The gopher sitting in his second cubicle there, eating a lot and smelling really bad. And every day you walk by and you kind of hold your nose. And everybody's passing jokes around the office and saying how bad this guy smells, but nobody's doing anything. Right? You can imagine the situation. What happens the first day I walk into that office and I walk over to that guy and I say, you know, you stink. You really need to start showering every day and change your clothes. You make this place impossible to live in. What's going to happen? He's going to say, oh, you're a bully, you're an asshole. He's going to ignore me, right? Because I'm the first one who's done it. But tomorrow, Sitska walks into that office. She has integrity, and she's probably a little nicer than me. She walks over and says, you know, you really smell bad, and it's hard to be around you. It would help if you maybe took a shower every day. And he'd say, somebody just told me that yesterday. Right? And the following day, Yost goes in there and says, hey, you need a shower. God, people keep telling me that. Right? When enough people start telling, it gets through. The reason that so many people get away with totally unacceptable behaviors, perhaps less so in the Dutch culture where somebody's always criticizing your behavior, but so many people get away with things is because nobody comments. Right? Imagine a father in a supermarket or a mother yelling at their kids. If you just went over and said, you know, yelling at your kids probably isn't the best way to deal with it. They'd scream at you, get out of my business, and what right do you have? Rah, 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 rah. But if half a dozen people in that supermarket came over and they all said, yeah, it's true. Yelling at your kids, probably actually angry at yourself. You got problems you need to deal with. It's not the kid's fault. You know, half a dozen people standing around telling them, they change. But half a dozen people telling them starts with one person telling them. And so my response is that if somebody's doing something you feel is unacceptable, right? Imagine a bunch of construction workers yelling racist comments. Would you just stand for it? You might. You're a yellow belt, right? You're just getting started, right? So it's still scary to you. But this is the same. This is a hate crime, in effect. It's a hate crime between the genders. So you can walk over to them and say, that's not okay. You can't be treating people like that. And if they don't listen, you go talk to their foreman and say, this group of people are out of line. He doesn't listen, you call the company that hired that foreman and you complain. Perhaps the foreman and all his men get fired. If not, they at least get a strong reprimand. And the first time, yeah, that's nice. If 6 people called that company in one day and said, I was walking by and that whoever that company was would be so tired of getting complaints, they would fix it. They would come down and give all those men a lecture on behaving more appropriately. Right? But the only way that 6 people can do it is if one does it. So this is my response to you. Act from integrity. Stand up against hate crimes. Make it known and encourage others to do the same. All right, anything else? What else? What do you do if you sense this and want to fix it, but your partner doesn't? Well, you're the one who asked. It's a reasonable question. What makes a relationship work is integrity. Not just integrity. There's, a need for gentleness and compassion, but integrity is a big part if you're lying in a relationship. it's going to fail. It has to. Even if you stay together, the relationship dies. If you begin to work with this and your partner isn't involved, doesn't care, doesn't want to know, all it takes is for you to have enough integrity for two. Right? You've got integrity from yourself. You find yourself getting snapped and you say, oh, wait a minute. I was snapping because. And, you know, it had to do more with my father or whatever. But if you'd been a woman, I wouldn't have done that. So I apologize. Right? And then when they do it, you have integrity for them. Ah, you said that because. And if I were a man, you wouldn't have done that. Right? You're going to have to play both sides of the game for a while. But generally speaking, if you're right, if you're actually poking at a sore spot, unless your partner is a complete buffoon, incompetent idiot, or really truly hates you and doesn't want your relationship to work, they will begin to notice. I say, oh, you know what? I do feel that every time you point that out, or I do sense that. And at first, you're going to have to play the grown-up for both of you. But if your partner is even a little bit invested in making your relationship work, as you continue to point it out, they will begin to notice and begin to change as well. One more question. And then I'll let Gimli talk to you for a moment. He can work like ginger to my sushi. He can clear your plates. One more question. What is it? Alright, I hear a question from over here. What if I'm already so broken, so damaged, that I'm just going to keep hurting people and there's nothing I can do about it? Right? Should I even bother with this? If I'm already such a screwed up person, is there any point? I would say if you can ask that question, you've already answered it. If you could say, I'm already screwed up and I'm going to hurt people, then you care about people. You've already answered your own question. If you feel like you've come too far without ever having a relationship, you know, the 40-year-old virgin, if you feel like you've come too far and had too many bad relationships, if you've hurt people too much that you can't forgive or they can't, if you can even wonder those things, then there's hope for you. Because you do want to live a little healthier and be a little happier and explore a little richer life. So this would be my answer to you. If you can wonder, then you can help it. You can fix, improve. And so I encourage all of you to look at the simple list of 5 or 6 things that I told you, and to play with them and to communicate them. And hopefully for the first time in a phenomenal number of years, begin to have truly healthy relationships in this world. I thank you for your attention, and I will give you to Gimli.
I'd like to start by thanking Angel for sharing all this with us. And I would like to say that the more attention I pay to his words, not just his words, well, words are nice, but actually to the energies, the more I get in my guts and my heart, the more I feel empowered every time he gives this talk. Yeah, that's awesome, that's amazing. So I would like to encourage all of you to pay attention, not just to the words, but the energies. Just start practicing, little steps. With that household remark out of the way, with that encouragement. And the tiger. I would like to share the story you've all been eager to hear for quite a while now. A few weeks ago, I was sitting outside of a coffee house in Groningen with Angel, and a man walked by on the street, and Angel pointed out, that man looks so depressed. He's considering suicide. And I was like, well, I'm not going to stand for that. So I took 2 seconds to gather my wits. I got up, I bolted across the street, got marched over there. And this was a big guy, like, well, 2 meters tall about, muscular. He was with a girlfriend and his girlfriend. But those were just little blurbs in my peripheral vision, because all I saw was, that man needs my help, now! So I slapped him on the shoulder and I said, "Hi, you look so blue today." And he was like, "Oh, what then?" "Well, yeah, I guess I did have kind of a rough night, and I was like, "Yeah, happens to all of us, man. I've been there." So we talked a bit, and I told him, "Yeah, you know, it's not so bad. I got over it, and look at me now. I felt really shitty a few years ago. I was considering just ending it all because it just felt so." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, you're actually right." So I gave him a little Elspeth card, and he was all joking, "Oh, you're giving me monetary support, And I was like, "Yeah." And he wandered across the street, and I was about to turn tail and walk back to the coffee house when he suddenly shouted, "Yes!" So I turned around, looked at him, in the middle of the street, said, "Yes!" And he shouted back, "Yes!" And I shouted, "Yeah!" in the middle of a public street. And we went on and on, shouting enthusiastically at each other as the distance increased, and the volume increased as well. And then I walked back, and Angel remarked, "You know, all the people who were looking by, and none of them looked scared or disgusted. They were like, oh, what is that about? Oh, he looks pretty happy, actually." So, it was rather amazing.
Gimli.
Yes.
Alright, you can hold it. I can talk. I was sitting next to a man. And he was looking at you astounded while you're doing this. Like, how can this guy do this? And I said, you know, this guy, this Gimli, he used to be really scared and timid with all this anxiety, and he couldn't leave his room. He hid behind his computer. And now look at it. And the man just shook his head like, wow, that's amazing. And as Gimli came back and sat down with us, I asked, what are you reading? And the man showed me the cover of his book. It was How to Get Over Anxiety.
Yes. So in that, I also acted like any A2F would and led by example, showing them, yes, anyone who just wants it enough can do it. Anyone who's willing to put in the work reaps the rewards. The more work you put in, the more awesome reward you get. Good night, folks. You can stop the recording now. Interns.